Have you ever stopped to think about how a simple reunion can completely transform the course of someone's life? What if that first love, which you believed was a thing of the past, was, in fact, the key to saving you in the most difficult times? Clarice's life seemed to be sinking into a cycle of relentless challenges, financial problems, insecurities, and decisions that seemed to take her further and further away from her dreams. But amidst the chaos, destiny brought back a figure from the past, someone she would never expect to see again, much less as her source of salvation. This is no ordinary fairy tale. It's not a story where everything is resolved magically. On the contrary, what Clarice faces reflects the harsh realities of those who struggle to get back on their feet, even when circumstances seem unbearable. The biggest lesson? Often, the people you least expect can be the ones who will make the biggest difference in your life. Curious to know how this reunion changed everything for Clarice? Get ready, because what you're about to discover could transform the way you see the challenges and opportunities that arise along your journey. You will certainly want to follow every twist and turn of this gripping story. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, click the subscribe button now and activate the bell so you don't miss any chapter of this inspiring journey. Together with Clarice, discover how facing challenges can bring unexpected surprises and profound transformations. Don't be left out. Sign up and be part of our community. Clarice, like many of us, is a dreamer. She deeply desires to be successful. She longs for a life different from what her current reality can provide. But it's not just about wanting something. It's about feeling deep in your heart that you can achieve more, even when everything around you seems to say otherwise. What happens to many people, and Clarice's case fits perfectly here, is that the environment we are born into can become an obstacle that is difficult to overcome. We often don't have the resources or opportunities that other people have, and this can make our dreams feel distant. But as I always say, dreams should not be measured by current circumstances. The real question is, are you willing to fight for them, regardless of where you started? Ken, on the other hand, represents that critical voice we all hear at some point in our lives. He tells Clarice that success isn't about hard work or being a good person. It's about what you have from the beginning. And this may be cruel, but it is the view that many people have of the world. Meritocracy, while seductive, often ignores unequal starting points. Ken symbolizes those who discourage us, who make us question whether we are on the right path, whether everything we believe makes sense. But what Clarice teaches us is that, regardless of what others say, you need to be stubborn with your dreams, instead of letting yourself get discouraged. How about starting right now to list small goals to achieve your goals? This may be the best answer for any Ken you meet along the way. An important point is to understand that the conflict between dreams and reality is not exclusive to Clarice. How many times do we find ourselves dreaming of a bright future while reality seems to push us in the opposite direction? And this is where the great insight lies. It is exactly in the confrontation between the dream and reality that the great transformations occur. Clarice shows us that, despite financial limitations, the disdain of others, and daily difficulties, the desire to be more can and should be the fuel to move forward. So, stop and think. What is really stopping you from pursuing your dreams today? However, it is also important to recognize that life does not always unfold like a fairy tale. Many people, like Clarice, are constantly reminded of their limitations. It's easy to say, go after your dreams. But when reality weighs in, this becomes an immense challenge. The secret, perhaps, is finding small victories along the way. A practical tip: how about starting by making a list of skills that you can improve, even without large resources? Constant learning can be the key to transforming reality little by little. Clarice carries the hope of many, but also the frustration that so many feel. She looks to the future with desire, but also with fear. What limits her is not just the lack of money or status, but the doubt planted by those around her. Who has never heard something like, "You weren't born for this"? And this is often the hardest fight to win, the internal battle. But Clarice, with all her simplicity and perseverance, teaches us that faith in oneself can be the greatest weapon against adversity. Another essential point is the fact that, for many people, success seems something reserved for others. This limited mindset is what stops many people from taking the first step. Clarice, despite criticism and difficulties, shows us that the first step is often to believe that you deserve more. And believing this is not arrogance. It is a necessity. So, stop and reflect. Do you allow yourself to dream big enough? The contrast between Clarice's dream and Ken's pragmatic vision brings us face to face with an uncomfortable truth. The people around us don't always root for our success. We are often faced with negative opinions, criticisms, and comments that can discourage us. But that's part of the process. Just like Clarice, we need to develop a kind of mental shield that protects us from these influences. An example, when someone tells you it's not possible, ask yourself, who is it not possible for? For you or for them? Ken, in his skepticism, also reminds us of an important lesson. The world will not always be fair. He believes that to be successful, you need to be on the right side of opportunities. But what it ignores is that often hard work and resilience can create opportunities where they don't seem to exist. Clarice, despite all her difficulties, continues to fight, and this is something we should all absorb. The ability to persist, even when the path seems cloudy. Clarice shows us that the power of dreams is transformative. Even in the face of all adversity, she holds on to what she believes is possible. Ken, by disdaining Clarice's dreams, symbolizes all those voices that try to make us give up. But as Clarice teaches us, these voices only have power over us if we allow them to. So what will you allow to guide your next steps? Criticism or your determination? Now the question remains, how far is Clarice willing to go to help others? Let's see in the next topic how your generosity shines, even in difficult times. Clarice is the type of person who always puts others first, even when her own life is full of challenges. In a world where most seek their own benefits, she stands out for her generosity. When her coworker Bree needs to miss work because of personal problems, Clarice doesn't hesitate to cover the shift. It is not just a question of professional responsibility, but of empathy. She sees other people's difficulties as an opportunity to make a difference. And that's something you can't teach. It's part of who she is. If you stop to think about it, how many times have you had the chance to help someone and hesitated? Clarice reminds us that small actions can have big impacts. Plus, his generosity goes beyond his work at the restaurant. Even without many resources, she offers to help Bree create a website and logo without charging a penny. That in itself is rare these days. Most of the time, we see people looking for some kind of return for everything they do. But Clarice believes that helping others is a long-term investment. She knows that one day, that kindness may return in unexpected ways. A practical tip for those who want to follow this path. Think about skills you have that could benefit others. Maybe it's something simple, like reviewing a resume or helping with a project, but the impact can be huge. The interesting thing is that, even with all the financial difficulties, Clarice does not hesitate to donate her time and talent, which leads us to a reflection. Do we often use our own limitations as an excuse for not helping others? Clarice could easily justify her lack of time or money, but instead she finds a way to be useful. And what can we learn from this? Maybe it's time to look beyond our limitations and find creative ways to make a difference. Clarice also teaches us that helping others is not just about money. Often the most valuable help we can offer is our time or knowledge. Clarice's example of creating a website for free shows that she values the power of collaborative work. Instead of expecting something in return, she offers her skills for the benefit of someone in need. This leads us to think, what could you offer others, even if you don't have much? Who knows, your knowledge, your experience, or even your free time could be useful to someone around you. Clarice's true essence lies not in her technical skills, but in her willingness to be useful in any situation. She sees the world not just as a place of opportunity for herself, but as a space where her actions can improve the lives of others. An example you can apply. If you have specific skills, like design, writing, or even organization, offer your help to someone just starting out. Clarice shows that it's not what we have, but what we do with what we have, that really matters. Her ability to help others is also revealed in the way she responds to her friend Bree's needs. Even when things are difficult for her, Clarice is always willing to give a little more of herself. And that's a powerful lesson. We often think we need to have everything in order before we can help others. But Clarice demonstrates that true generosity comes from those who understand the value of being supportive, even in difficult times. Another fascinating aspect of Clarice's story is her humility. She does not boast of her good deeds, nor does she expect recognition. This is something that is missing in today's world, where people often only help when there is some type of immediate return. Clarice teaches us that true generosity does not come from seeking rewards, but from doing what is right, simply because it is the right thing to do. Have you ever thought about how this could change the way you act on a daily basis? Clarice's generosity also challenges the idea that we can only help when we are well. In fact, it is in the most difficult times that our kind actions shine brightest. She reminds us that even when we are in difficult situations, there is always something we can do to improve someone else's life. It can be something simple, like a gesture of support, a kind word, or a small action that makes a difference. And the amazing thing is that by helping others, we often help ourselves too. Clarice makes us reflect on the importance of creating a support network. By helping Bree with the website and logo, she not only provides an immediate solution, but also builds a connection of trust and gratitude. And this is something we can all learn. The relationships we form through generosity are the most lasting and meaningful. Think of someone you could help today. One small action can start a chain of mutual support that could bear fruit in the future. So, while Clarice is constantly giving herself to help others, a new crisis approaches in her life. Let's see how she deals with losing her job in the next topic. Life can be cruel, and few things are as destabilizing as losing your job. For Bree, this was a hard blow, but it is Clarice, in an act of pure generosity, who sacrifices herself to ensure that her friend continues with the work. And this is not just any gesture, it is an example of how powerful empathy and altruism can be in times of crisis. Clarice, by choosing to give up her own job, shows that her sense of solidarity is above her immediate needs. She understands the difficulty Bree faces, and, without thinking twice, offers a solution that many would not be willing to provide. Imagine how transformative it would be if we all looked at each other's challenges with the same willingness to help. By giving up her own financial security, Clarice teaches us that, often, the most impactful actions are those that require personal sacrifice. She's not just talking about helping. She's literally putting her friend before herself. This leads us to reflect. How often are we willing to put others first, even if it costs us something valuable? Perhaps this is one of the greatest lessons we can learn from Clarice. The value of selflessness. In practice, think about how you can prioritize the needs of someone close to you who is in a difficult situation. Sometimes offering an opportunity or giving up something that isn't so essential to you can make all the difference. Clarice, when deciding to leave her job, knows that she is throwing herself into a sea of uncertainty, but at the same time, it demonstrates your faith that good things will come in the future. It is interesting to observe how she faces the situation with courage, without losing hope. Many people, when faced with the loss of a job, despair and feel defeated. Clarice, however, chooses to see the situation as temporary, believing that something better can emerge. If you're going through something similar, good advice would be to adopt the same mindset. View this loss as an opportunity to redirect your life. Often, leaving a job opens doors to new paths. Clarice's sacrifice also raises a fundamental question about solidarity in times of crisis, in times of difficulty. Who is really willing to sacrifice themselves for others? Most people stay away, thinking about their own needs, but Clarice does the opposite. She challenges the logic of every man for himself, showing that, in difficult situations, helping someone can be the greatest expression of strength. If we stop to think, how many times do we avoid helping someone simply because we are worried about our own difficulties? Maybe it's time to reflect. How far are we willing to go to support others? Another important point is the confidence that Clarice demonstrates in her resilience. Even though she knows that losing her job could bring difficulties, she is confident that she will find a new opportunity. This reflects an essential characteristic in times of crisis, the ability to believe in yourself and your own ability to rise again. If you are facing something similar, Remember that every setback is temporary, and often the key to future success lies in how we handle these situations. Clarice shows us that optimism and confidence are powerful tools to face challenges, and we cannot ignore the emotional impact of this decision. Clarice, by leaving her job, is not only giving up a stable income, but she is also dealing with the emotional weight of leaving a place where she probably made friends and bonded. The loss of a job is often more than the financial loss. It is the loss of a routine, of a sense of belonging. However, Clarice's decision is motivated by the greater good, and it makes us wonder, can we, when we are in difficult situations, see beyond our own immediate needs? Perhaps true strength lies in realizing that what we do for others can be a way to find new purpose. One of the most powerful lessons here is that even in the most difficult situations, we can make decisions that resonate deeply in the lives of others. Clarice could have just let Bree lose her job and moved on with her life, but by deciding to leave, she directly impacts her friend's future. And this leads us to an important reflection. What are you willing to do to change the life of someone around you? It can be a small gesture or a big action, but the important thing is to understand that our decisions have a ripple effect. Clarice also teaches us about emotional resilience. Losing her job isn't easy, but she chooses to keep her head up and keep fighting. We are often hit by unexpected obstacles, and how we deal with these situations defines who we are. Instead of falling into despair, Clarice chooses a positive attitude, believing that this phase is only temporary. And this is a lesson that we can all take into life. Believing that, no matter how challenging the circumstances, there is always a way out. If you are going through a moment of uncertainty, remember that, like Clarice, it is possible to find strength in the most difficult times. Finally, Clarice's decision to leave her job makes room for a new journey. She doesn't know what the future holds, but she is ready to face whatever comes, with courage and determination. It's a reminder that sometimes we need to let go of something to make room for new opportunities. What Clarice doesn't yet know is that this courageous decision will lead her to even greater challenges in the corporate world, where Ken, her old school friend, is facing his own battles. Ken lives in a harsh and competitive corporate reality, where being good at what he does is not always enough to guarantee recognition. He works for his uncle, who clearly favors his cousin, Leanne, at every opportunity. This type of situation is not uncommon in the business world, where family ties, favoritism, and hierarchies can determine someone's success more than talent itself. Ken finds himself trapped in a cycle in which, no matter how hard he tries, he always takes a back seat. This leads us to an important reflection: how to deal with these injustices. Sometimes the only way out is to create your own opportunities, rather than waiting for them to come from sources that are already committed. Ken's frustration is palpable. He feels like he is constantly in Leanne's shadow, someone who, in his eyes, doesn't try as hard as he does. This family rivalry creates intense pressure on Ken, who begins to doubt himself. Many of us have been in that position, where effort seems to go unrecognized. And at these times, the temptation to look for shortcuts or create artificial situations can be strong. This is where Ken makes a dangerous choice. He decides to invent a false narrative of stability, creating a fictitious marriage to impress his uncle and gain more credibility. This type of decision may seem like a quick solution, but the price of lying, as we will see later, is always high. In the corporate environment, image is everything. Ken knows that to be taken seriously, he needs to project stability and responsibility. And in your uncle's universe, marriage is a clear symbol of maturity and reliability. So, by inventing a wife, Ken tries to fill this gap in his professional image. It's a choice that many people make, to varying degrees, when trying to conform to the expectations of others, instead of focusing on their own value and real achievements. But is it worth sacrificing your authenticity to please others? Instead of following Ken's example, a practical tip would be to continually work on your personal and professional development, without relying on illusions to advance your career. Ken also faces the weight of living under his family's expectations. Success in your career is not just about achieving your personal goals. It's about gaining the approval of her uncle, who clearly prefers Leanne. And that kind of dynamic can be suffocating. When we feel like we are always competing for attention or recognition within a family environment, it can deeply affect our self-esteem. Ken is so obsessed with being recognized by his uncle that he loses sight of what really matters: his own potential. A practical example: instead of focusing solely on pleasing authority figures, how about taking the time to recognize your own worth? This can start with something simple, like making a list of your most important accomplishments and reflecting on how you can continue to grow without relying on external approval. The relationship between Ken and his uncle also teaches us about the pitfalls of seeking incessant approval. Instead of valuing his own talents, Ken feels like he needs to prove something to someone who clearly doesn't value his efforts. This is a dilemma faced by many professionals. They seek recognition from people who are often more concerned with their own agendas. What can we learn from this? Perhaps the key to success is not pleasing everyone, but recognizing when it's time to change direction. If you feel like you are in an environment where your talent is not appreciated, consider looking for new opportunities in places where your value is recognized. Ken, by choosing lying as a strategy, puts not only his career at risk, but also his integrity. The desire to please and be promoted leads you to make decisions that, in the long term, can have devastating consequences. In the corporate world, building a solid reputation is essential, and this can only be done based on the truth. Ken, in contrast, creates a facade that will eventually crumble, and that's a crucial lesson. The truth may be uncomfortable, but it's always the best policy. If you're feeling pressured to exaggerate your abilities or create a false image to climb the career ladder, remember that these tactics rarely have good results. Real success is built on authenticity and consistency. Another interesting aspect of this situation is how internal competition can undermine someone's confidence. Ken is so focused on getting over Leanne that he loses perspective on his own abilities. This is something common in environments where there is favoritism. People spend more time comparing themselves to others than improving their own skills. What Ken doesn't realize is that by seeking recognition through deceptive means, he is sabotaging his chances of real success. A practical tip: instead of worrying about competing with your peers, focus on developing your skills and let your work speak for itself. This may be more difficult, but the results are much longer lasting. Ken's choice also leads us to reflect on how family pressures can influence our professional decisions. We are often driven to take actions to meet our family's expectations, even if those expectations are not aligned with what we really want for ourselves. Ken is so concerned with impressing his uncle that he forgets to question whether this is really what he wants. And this is something we should all consider. Are we living to please others or to follow our own paths? Clarice, for example, despite her difficulties, maintains her authenticity, while Ken gets lost amid family expectations. Ultimately, the false narrative created by Ken reminds us that the truth always comes out. He believes that by inventing a marriage, he will be able to gain his uncle's trust and, with that, move up his career ladder. But as we will see later, this decision puts him in an even more complicated situation. And just like in real life, lies in the corporate environment are always discovered, and the consequences can be severe. This is why it is so important to maintain an honest and authentic attitude, even in the face of pressure. What Ken hasn't yet realized is that by staying true to himself, he could have achieved success in a more lasting and less draining way. As the lie grows and the weight of expectations increases, Ken will soon realize that the truth is inevitable. But will he be able to deal with the consequences of his choices? Let's see in the next topic how truth and the power of honesty come into play. Truth is a powerful force, and both Clarice and Ken, at some point in their journeys, are confronted with this reality. Clarice, from the beginning, keeps her integrity intact, even in the face of the difficulties and challenges she faces. She firmly believes that being a good person and working hard are the keys to success. This belief, although often put to the test, is what keeps her firm. And this leads us to an interesting reflection. How often are we tempted to give up our truth in search of shortcuts? Clarice shows us that, no matter how difficult the path of honesty may be, it is always the most rewarding in the long run. Ken, on the other hand, struggles with the truth. He builds a web of lies in hopes of impressing his uncle and excelling in his career. However, as often happens, the truth eventually comes out. The problem with basing your life on lies is that sooner or later, you will find yourself trapped in the consequences of your own creations. Ken begins to realize that, by trying to appear something he is not, he is distancing himself from his true essence and, at the same time, putting at risk all the genuine opportunities he could achieve. If you've ever found yourself in a situation where the truth seemed too difficult to handle, remember, in the short term, lying may seem like a solution, but the truth will always find a way to manifest itself. Family pressure plays a crucial role in Ken's decisions. He believes that the only way to earn his uncle's respect is by projecting an image of success and stability that does not match his reality. And this is a struggle many can relate to. The desire to meet family expectations, even if it means sacrificing one's authenticity. But as Ken discovers, other people's expectations can't define who you are. When we build our lives around who others expect us to be, instead of who we really are, we end up living a lie. Good advice. Always question whether the expectations you are trying to meet are truly yours or whether they have been imposed by others. Clarice, on the other hand, always chooses the truth, even when it seems to put her at a disadvantage. Throughout the story, she remains true to her principles, believing that honesty, even if it doesn't bring immediate results, is the path to a life of fulfillment. And this makes us wonder, how often are we tempted to take shortcuts that compromise our integrity? Clarice reminds us that although the honest path may be the most difficult, it is the only one that leads to a true sense of peace and success. If you are dealing with a difficult decision, ask yourself, what path resonates most with your truth? Ken's decision to lie is ultimately a reflection of his insecurity. He doesn't believe he is capable of achieving success on his own merit, so he resorts to a false narrative. This lack of confidence in yourself is something many people can relate to. When we feel like we are not enough, we try to fill those gaps with lies or exaggerations. But what Ken learns the hard way is that self-confidence must come from within. It doesn't matter what others expect of you. What really matters is what you believe you are capable of accomplishing. If you feel like you're struggling to find that inner confidence, how about starting with small steps that strengthen your self-esteem? Sometimes the first step to truth is recognizing your own worth. Clarice, on the other hand, never loses sight of who she really is. Even with all the difficulties, she does not give in to external pressure to be something she is not. This loyalty to herself is what ultimately keeps her at peace, even when things don't go as expected. And this is a valuable lesson. Internal peace can only be achieved when we live in tune with our truth. If you feel disconnected from yourself, perhaps it's time to take a break and reflect on your choices. Are you living up to who you really are? Or are you conforming to the expectations of others? The final confrontation between Ken and the truth is inevitable. When his lies begin to fall apart, he realizes that the price of his shares is much higher than he expected. And this is a universal lesson. Lies may seem like a temporary solution, but the truth always prevails. Ken, when faced with the consequences of his choices, is forced to face the reality that authenticity is the only solid foundation on which to build a life. And this goes for all of us. No matter how painful the truth may be, it is always the path to true freedom. Clarice, throughout the story, is an example of how the truth can be liberating. While Ken loses himself in her lies, she stands firm in her belief that honesty and hard work are the keys to a successful life. And although she faces many difficulties, Clarice never deviates from her path. It teaches us that regardless of circumstances, truth is the only way to achieve true fulfillment. And at the end of the day, that's what we all seek. A life that makes sense, that is aligned with who we really are. Now, with the truth exposed, both Ken and Clarice face new possibilities. But will Ken be able to rebuild his life on the basis of honesty? Let's find out. Have you ever stopped to reflect on how your choices today can define your tomorrow? Throughout this story, Clarice showed us that, even when the path seems full of obstacles, honesty and the courage to be who we really are can take us far beyond what we imagine. And Ken, with all his attempts to cover up the truth, has learned the hard way that shortcuts are never the best solution. The big question is, what are you going to do with all this knowledge? Are you ready to apply these lessons to your life? How much are you willing to change to be more true to yourself and others? These questions are the first step to transforming your trajectory. The truth is that courageous choices, even if difficult, are those that bring the greatest returns. And now it's your turn to take control of your story. If this reflection touched you in any way, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue learning how these teachings can help you achieve a fuller and more authentic life. Don't miss the opportunity to be one step closer to your true potential.